with a unique German translation.
It's really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's like Hansel and Gretel, old.
Wow, the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Thou and thee, and yeah, amazing.
In school, we learned this, how to write that.
Yafeh. So we are approaching the holiday. Hope you enjoyed your Shabbat Zachor with its unique festivities. A lot of fun.
Very much.
Amazing. We had somebody in our shul who read the Zachor reading about Amalek. So they read it first in the regular tune and the regular pronunciation, Israeli Sephardi, and then somebody read Yemenite. Then there was an Ashkenazi version, and then somebody to make a joke. He read it like in English, from a chumash, as like an American pastor, like in the Bible Belt.
Okay.
It was really fun. Remember those Amalekites, thou shalt not forget.
Beautiful.
Everybody said, "Amen." So we got into the spirit, and as we get closer to the holiday, we'll do a brief review of some of the laws of Purim. You should be experts already, or even tested on it. Remember, we had a quiz. We went over the laws of Purim. In the meantime, we're going to keep going to get ready, because once Purim comes, that means we only have 2 weeks left until the Pesach break. So we're going to continue working on our Pesach material. And we got up to page 203, if I'm not mistaken. We talked about the main message of the Haggadah, trying to connect all those people present, including yourself, don't forget, and of course the children, to this Jewish tradition, to the chain of the Jewish people, and for all the way back from our history, both physical and spiritual slavery in some manner, all the way towards being released and redeemed, towards the ultimate redemption. There's Rav Soloveitchik. He was against people using the terms redemption when it comes to Medinat Yisrael, and as opposed to Rav Kook, who was very adamant that, of course, this is the redemption, and this is a big part of his theology and worldview, is that we're so lucky. And Rav Soloveitchik, even though he appreciated that, all the ingathering of the exiles, and he wrote and spoke about it with tremendous passion, how we've seen miracles that we haven't seen for thousands of years, and Jewish people coming back to the land. But he was reticent from using the word redemption. Redemption, he said, there's only one redemption, really. Well, how can there be one redemption? What about Egypt? So he said, really, there's only one redemption. And ultimately, the redemption from Egypt, so many thousands of years ago, never was completed. And ultimately, when Mashiach does come, it's not a new redemption. It's really just a completion of the redemption which started at Egypt, really the redemption of the world, the redemption of the Jewish people, that ultimately is for the sake of the whole world. And it's one long story. It's not two redemptions or three redemptions, as sometimes we think about it, because the second temple, the first temple building, the second temple building, and then hopefully the third temple soon. So, but at some point it becomes a question of semantics, really. Call it a redemption, don't call it a redemption. We live in amazing times. We see amazing grace from Hashem for the Jewish people after very, very dark times. And we hope to see more and more light and more redemption. The signs of it are clear. Here we are sitting in Jerusalem learning Torah after thousands of years, and Jewish country is what did we say the other week? Coming back to the stage of history with the latest, unfortunately, the latest world war raging in Europe, and they're turning to Israel. Apparently, the Prime Minister of the Ukraine asked Prime Minister Bennett if he could hold the talks for negotiations here in Israel. It may be a trap. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but the very fact that we are in contact, that we have we're playing statesmanship with these world powers, it's quite a shocking and turn of history, maybe an ironic turn of history, where of course they massacred Jews. Ukrainians are one of the worst anti-Semites in our history, and people all know about the Shoah. Of course, only 80 years ago, and it's so central to our consciousness. But in the day, 250 years ago, based on the amount of population in the world and the amount of Jewish population in the world, the massacres in the Ukraine were equivalent to the Holocaust in terms of the number of Jews that they killed, and it was like the Holocaust of 250 years ago was in the Ukraine by the Ukrainians. And so we have this historical consciousness, and here we have Baruch Hashem, Medinat Yisrael was a strong superpower, and they're begging us for weapons, begging us to help them, and I don't know if the weapons are going to happen, but maybe negotiations, by all means, it's a wonderful thing if we can stop this terrible war as soon as possible. Be'ezrat Hashem. Anyways, getting back to, so this is a sign of the redemption. So whether you call it redemption, you don't call it redemption, it's definitely a big change, and we have to praise Hashem at every step along the way. And this is part of the story of the Jewish people. And here we have the Rav Melamed on page 203. We're in the Rav Pnina Khan Pesach in chapter, I think it's 15, section 7. From indignity to praise, he tells a little bit in more detail the structure of the Haggadah, the structure of the story part of the Haggadah, the Magid section. As we're gonna review the actual order soon. From indignity to praise. Okay, David, take it away, please.
The sages state that one must begin the story of the Exodus with indignity, genut, and the end with praise, sheva. To what sort of indignity does this refer, physical or spiritual? According to one Talmudic sage, Shmuel, it refers to physical indignity, the fact that we were slaves to Paro in Egypt, and that the Egyptians embittered our lives with all manner of hard labor until God redeemed us from their oppression. Another sage, Rav, maintains that this refers to spiritual indignity. The fact that our distant ancestors, Terah and Lavan, were pagans, and through the long process of refinement, we became an entire nation of monotheists. In practice, we follow both approaches, recounting in the Haggadah the process of our emergence from enslavement to freedom, as well as the process that took us from idolatry to the point when God revealed himself to us and we achieved complete faith. At first glance, it might seem preferable to tell only the pleasant and agreeable stories. A deeper second glance, however, makes it clear that the more we contemplate the hardships of the enslavement and the ignominy of the paganism practiced by our forefathers, the better we can grasp the enormity of our redemption. Light is more discernible in the midst of darkness. In addition, discussing our undignified beginnings allow us to better understand the Israelis' uniqueness. That Israel's uniqueness is not contingent upon our success or good deeds, but is rooted in divine election that lies beyond all human comprehension. Though we lacked all dignity as contemptible slaves, God chose us from all other nations and took us out of Egypt with signs and demonstrations. Despite the fact that our forefathers were idolaters, God chose to reveal himself to us and give us the Torah. Thus, Israel's special status is not contingent on anything of this world, but on divine fight. This can also teach us about Israel's unique ability to bring redemption to the world, to turn darkness into light and evil into good. We start the story by emphasizing our former indignity to show that from the ignorance of paganism and servitude, we rose up and achieved great things. This is an encouraging and comforting message. As then, so too now. Our redemption will emerge from the suffering and travails of recent generations. Additionally, discussing the fact that we are ignoble slaves awakens our sensitivity and consideration for strangers and for the unfortunates who suffer and need help, as it stated. Do not oppress the stranger, for you know how it feels to be a stranger, since you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Beautiful. 4 meanings there of Melamed. Who can summarize them for us? The 4 meanings that he pulls out from this structure of the Haggadah. It's mandated by the Mishnah. It says you have to matchil begnut u'mesayem b'shevach. You start off with the indignity, the bad parts, and you can finish up with the praise, which is taken to mean the happy ending. So what are the 4 messages that he pulls out? Who can tell me one of the 4 messages?
So it's one of those is enslavement, like enslavement from Egypt. I didn't want to say that.
So what were you going to say?
I want to say that the idolatry, that we came from the indignity of idolatry and rose up. And
that's one of the stories, no question. We said Rav and Shmuel. Rav says it's the spiritual freedom from being pagans, and Shmuel says it's the physical story of being tortured and afflicted physically, and then we got released. But what's unique meaning can we learn from the fact that we have to talk about both? It's a party. We should just be happy. Why do we have to tell this whole story with the bad parts too? Yes, Yossi, give me one meaning.
There is a mental aspect here that we came from slaves. We came from the bottom of the barrel. We came from absolutely nowhere. And that shows that you should be humble, but you've also been made into something incredibly great, which is another point that he makes here. How we come from an ignoble background.
Right. Excellent. That's one point he makes. It's sort of like a moral message, and maybe something which gives you comfort on the one hand, and also encouragement that there are hard times. Everybody has things in their past that they from darkness to light. But what do you learn from coming from we have to tell the story of the darkness in this message to be encouraged that we can get up again after we fall, like we did in the past. Okay, that's one message. Very good. What other message? We just read it. Just making sure our reading comprehension is is working this morning. It's early Sunday morning. There's another message he mentioned. I don't know if you noticed it. He said that it's a little bit of a fine point. He says that the Jewish people are chosen
to bring redemption to the world.
To bring redemption to the world, but not necessarily based on our actions. We didn't necessarily deserve it. We didn't earn it. God decided to choose us, and He chose us. We were slaves. We were probably close to what the Egyptians were in terms of their idolatry. The Segula, very good. That's a special chosenness. Yafeh Meod. So it's not contingent on anything, but Hashem decided. And this is, of course, encouraging when you look around and you read the news and you see all the bad things that we're doing. And, what are we going to have redemption? Are we really worthy? And we can get encouragement, perhaps, from telling the story. We started off, we didn't have any worthiness, and yet God redeemed us. So God can redeem us maybe in this time as well, even if we don't necessarily deserve it. That's another message. What else? What else? We read it. I saw 4 messages. I'm just trying to analyze what Rabbi Melamed, he brought up 4 beautiful ideas from this idea. You have to mention the bad before you get to the good. The first thing he mentions was because the light is always stronger after the dark. You notice it, the contrast. So really, all we're doing is emphasizing it and raising up, making sure that the praise is at the highest level, because you're only going to appreciate the praise at the highest level when you start with the darkness. And the light is greater when it comes from the darkness. That's the most simple first point. Then he went into this idea that we learn that we were chosen not by our own merits, as the Psukim and Devarim say, but by God's chosenness. And then the encouragement that, we have the power to rise even from the lowest places. And the last message, yes?
As we were are stranger, we must be sensitive and respect the strangers.
That's right. That's right. Good. It teaches us sensitivity. The Torah mentions a number of times. Remember, you were slaves in Egypt. Be nice to the stranger. Be nice to the
stranger's not sensitive to you.
Oh, of course, yeah. Of course, you have to. Someone, what does it say? Someone comes to kill you, you kill him first. But assuming that there's no evil doing, and somebody's just downtrodden or somebody's in trouble, we have to have heightened sensitivity to the needs of somebody who's other, a stranger, a ger, for example. Somebody doesn't have family connections, and do everything in our power to make them comfortable. This should be, we should be more careful. That's what some of our people are saying now, by the way. Just tie it back into current events. We should be taking in refugees from the war in the Ukraine, and more so than any other country, because we're supposed to learn from this Egypt story how hard it is to be without a home and to be a stranger in a foreign land. All these people left with the shirt on their back and freezing cold. And I think it's a good point. We should. And I think that we have tremendous potential to accomplish a lot of things at the same time. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we're going to take care of hundreds of thousands of refugees. We want to focus on the ones which are descendants of Jews. There are approximately 150,000 descendants of Jews among these refugees. And we should focus on them, of course. They are, by right of Israeli law, they have the right for citizenship. And we should be careful to get them. And we don't have to just get your average Ukrainian on the street who probably is a descendant of the anti-Semite Khmelnytsky and the horrible people that killed us. So we can be a little picky, but that doesn't mean we're taking less. We're taking more than any other country. We'd be happy to take all 150,000 of them, those descendants of Jews who unfortunately got estranged and married out. This is part of the way history works, and it's no fault of theirs, really. But this heightened sensitivity to the plight of the people who are, not in their home country, is one of the messages of Pesach, and we should definitely imbibe that message and review that message more in this season and in this time. It's a little bit complicated how to, apply that in the current situation. Somebody who's a refugee, it's a sensitive topic. Sending them somewhere else, letting them come in, and then making sure they go out. There's all sorts of different ways. Leave that to the politicians. That's their job and the people in the government. But in principle, by all means, we should be very sensitive and try to bring them all in. And we have a double motive here of bringing back our estranged children. Essentially, these are descendants of Jews, even though they may not all halachically be Jewish. Apparently, only like 50,000 of them are halachically Jewish. But the story with the wrong grandparent, that was Jewish. But ultimately, they're lost children too, and I think it's a mitzvah to bring them back if they have the Jewish blood in them and they got estranged. Tov, let's move on. Page 205. Ariel, you're on. That's a very interesting Haggadah.
The meaning of the 10 plagues. The Torah describes the 10 plagues at length and in great detail, without omitting a single plague. There are many things we can learn from this. The most obvious is that there is a judge and there is justice, and the wicked eventually will be perished. Those who are especially wicked, like the Egyptians, who enslaved the entire nation, imposed back-breaking labor, and drowned their male children in the Nile, deserved to receive their full punishment so that all generations might learn this lesson.
Okay, reward and punishment, very simple, yeah.
There is also a profound allusion here. As we know, the world was created with 10 divine utterances. Kabbalah interprets these as 10 Sepharot or emanations, which God created the world and continues to maintain and sustain it. However, until the nation of Israel emerged, these Sepharot were concealed and hidden. Just as these 10 spiritual elements were hidden, so too the Israelites, before they matured enough to emerge as a nation, were enslaved in Egypt. When Israel finally reached maturity, numbering 600,000, the time had come for them to go free. It was then that God commanded Moshe to go to Pharaoh and order him to free my people so that they may make a pilgrimage to me in the wilderness. Moshe did so, but Pharaoh refused to free them, saying, "Who is God that I should heed his call to free Israel? I did not know God, and I will not free Israel." Pharaoh stubbornly refused God's command many times, but God's will prevails, and no man can stand up to God's word, not even the leader of the strongest empire in the world. Using the same elements he used to create the world, God rocked the Egyptian empire with plague after plague, so that the 10 utterances of creation took the form of 10 plagues until the Egyptians were completely broken and Israel went free. When we arrived at Mount Sinai, God revealed the meaning of those 10 utterances in the 10 Commandments, the Torah's foundation.
Okay, you just studied a little bit of Kabbalah,
What?
right? Kabbalah says that the 10 is a very big number in, of course, the 10 Commandments and the 10 plagues. And according to Kabbalah, there's 10 utterances, or 10, which represent the 10 Sphirot. What are the Sphirot? In brief, they're ways in which God reveals himself to the world, the way God acts in the world. And he created the world, but then he recreated the world again with the Jewish people in Egypt. And that's why there's 10 plagues. Each plague, you have to try to analyze it. That's already deeper stuff. Try to figure out which plague is which Sphira, which one of the 10 Sphirot. But he says here that what we have here, and this is actually mentioned in the Haggadah explicitly, it says that the night of the Seder, what we're reenacting, and it's very clear that what happened on the night of the 15th of Nisan, when the Jewish people left, was a revelation of the divine presence. It says the Shekhinah was revealed. I mean, God, his hand was the most obvious and noticeable when he publicly distinguished and smote every firstborn of the Egyptians and saved the Israeli firstborns, the Israelites' firstborns, and God acting in history in the most revealed way. So that's maybe that's the highest of the 10 Sphirot. I don't know. Maybe that's the Keter. Maybe that's it says he him not of his any of his angels. Right? We repeat a number of times in the Haggadah that God revealed himself, and so this revelation element of the redemption from the Exodus from Egypt. There's a revelation of God, revelation of his 10 aspects, all 10 aspects of the way God influences the world, and they're parallel to the 10 Commandments as well. We try to figure that out, exactly which Sphira comes with which plague and which of the 10 Commandments, but that's for a deeper class, perhaps. That's for Pesach 102 or 103 or 4 or 5 or 6. I don't think anybody in this building, if you ask them, could tell you straight off the bat which one of the 10 Sphirot applies to Dam, Tzfardea, Kinim, Akkad. It's elaborated upon in the works of the Arizal, but that's more detailed stuff. Yes, Michael, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, what I also always found interesting about the 10 plagues is like when you read the stories about the 10 plagues, all the first plagues was like Hashem, he make a door, he make the Nile like blood, and all the Israel they had to do nothing. But until the 10th plague, it's interesting that they also were involved in the act because they had to prepare, to cut the sheep, to kill the lamb, and to make the blood. And it's fun to see like for the other ones, they had to do nothing, but the last one they also were like part of the plague because
I'd say it a little differently. It seems like sorry.
The first plague we did have something to do with if the Egyptians wanted water, they had to purchase it from the Jews.
So I think we have to separate between what is actually mentioned in the Torah, and there's midrashic elaborations upon all the midrashim. There's the midrash says there was one big frog and it got split up into 1,000 different frogs, right? But the Torah says that there was a plague of frogs. also with the blood. It says they didn't have any water, and so they had to scrounge and find water elsewhere other than from the Nile. It doesn't say that they bought it from the Egypt. Let me just finish, and I want to relate to Michal's question first, without getting into all the midrashim. Midrashim elaborate upon upon the plagues, and like every midrash, we're not quite sure whether this is a literal description, historical description that they're trying to say, or they're trying to teach us something, and trying to give us a message about the details of the plague. But the point is, I want to answer Michal's comment. It seems to me more like all 10 plagues, we didn't do anything. It's true that even Moshe had to do something. God tells him pour the water, touch with the staff, throw the earth in the air, etc. There are certain actions to trigger it, which Moshe had to do. But the Jewish people were passive. Were passive throughout. Even the 10th plague, really, I mean, we didn't have any vigilante groups that were going out to kill the Egyptians. It was all God's hand, right? It was we were locked inside our homes. The only part we had was really to put the blood. Bring the Pesach sacrifice and put the blood on the doorposts so that we get saved. But that was like in preparation for the actual plague. It wasn't really part of the plague. The plague itself was the killing of the Egyptians, and that God did. We didn't go out and participate. So but it is true that it's like we mentioned the other day the metaphor of a baby being born. Babies born, they can't do much for themselves, at least human children, and God sort of protected us in the womb, put us in the womb of our houses for that night, and then the next day we went out, and there's even a birthing canal. We came through the Red Sea, right, through the waters, right. He split the waters. When the waters break, that's when birth happens, right?
It's an interesting analogy.
It is, and then when a baby is born, he doesn't know how to talk yet. When did we learn how to speak? When did we find our voice? Only 50 days later at Sinai.
Yeah.
We got the Dvarim, the Aseret HaDvarim, the words. And in Egypt, I think Rav Michael was speaking to you the other day, that we just called out, cried, wailed from the hard work. We didn't have, again, this is based on the words of the Kabbalah. They describe that this is, we didn't have our words yet. The Jewish people were like a baby that without, almost like we were like animals at that stage. We weren't human yet. An animal, okay, if you hurt an animal, he'll cry. It's almost like a primal scream that we cried out to God. We can't take this anymore. This affliction, this is torture. And then when God is birthing us, He protected us. So He did everything. Then the Haggadah stresses that it was all God and not us. And only later on, of course, as what I wanted to say is that we want to teach the child to be independent, to be able to do things. And so the first mitzvah which we received has to do with, of course, Rosh Chodesh, and then bringing the Pesach sacrifice. So there is a little bit of commandments for the Jewish people to be active, but it's really just the beginning. It's not really about the plagues. It's just to be active in general and starting to grow up as a nation and be able to find their feet and find their way, learn how to walk, learn how to talk. And this is a beautiful metaphor for the process. Okay? All right, let's continue. Pesach Matzah Maror. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Gamliel would say, whoever, we actually recite this in the Haggadah, whoever does not recite these three things has not fulfilled his obligation. Pesach Matzah Maror. And the best explanation that we already talked about, maybe he's going to repeat it now, on page 206 at the top, someone's going to read for us, the best explanation, what Rabbi Gamliel is saying, you can't just tell the story. You have to have audiovisual aids. You have to tell the story by explaining, this is the Pesach, this is the Matzah, and this is the Maror. Red, right? Maror, horseradish. But wait, we're crippled. We're crippled. Why? Out of the three, we don't have the Pesach anymore. We don't have the Pesach. We can't point at the Pesach and taste it like we taste the matzah and the maror.
Chicken bone.
We look at it. We do a commemoration, but There's just not. It's not the same. It's imperfect, but we'll do our best. But the idea originally was not only to touch and show and tell, but it's actually to eat. You ate the Pesach, you ate the matzah, you ate the maror. You tell the story through active participation and really experiential tasting the story. You taste the story. You know these books that I have for my grandchildren now. Some of the books are children's books, so you read out loud and there's pictures. It's very nice. So that's why the Haggadah that you guys are really distracted by this morning. It has pictures. It has such good pictures. That's it. The children, they need a distraction. It's not a distraction if it's on topic. David. Yeah, it's true. David, I'm really talking about this. It's distracting though, looking at the pictures of the. When you're in the Haggadah, it's great. So you have pictures nowadays, but then there's some children's books that only have pictures. When there's when there's a story about a cat, there's like a little patch of fuzzy fur, right? And then when you turn the page and they talk about a piece of wood, so there's like a scratchy surface, so you get to feel as well. So tactile sense, and then there's scent. Be careful about the chametz there. That's right. You push a button and it speaks. So that's what the Haggadah is supposed to be. It's a multi-sensory experience. We taste the matzah, we taste the maror. We can't taste the Pesach right now, so we do our best. But with my wife's chicken soup is, that's not quite Korban Pesach, but
So delicious.
and the matzah balls, right? If you eat gebroks, you don't eat gebroks. All right. Anyways, let's see what Rabbi Menachem has. Page 206. Natan, will you read for us, please?
All right, fine. From 206?
Yeah, top of 206.
This means that even one who cannot recite the entire Haggadah must at least delve into the three food-related mitzvot of the Seder night. The Torah thus states regarding the mitzvah to teach the children who does
The child who does not know how to ask.
To teach the child who does not know how to ask. Tell your child on that day, it is because of this that God did for me when I left Egypt. Shemot 13:8. And the sages teach, because of this means when the matzah and maror are before you on your table. This teaches that one must at least reflect upon the reasons for the three foods we have been commanded to eat on the Seder night. Even though we are unable to offer the Paschal sacrifice nowadays, we are nonetheless commanded to recall its meaning.
I see if you have to choose between, you're right, you're in the army, I don't know, whatever, you have a very limited time. You have to go somewhere very quickly. You have to make a very quick Haggadah. Which would you skip, the Ten Commandments or this section? Rabbi Gamliel says you have to understand the Pesach, the Matzah, and the Moror. It's a hard choice. But it sounds like Rabbi Gamliel is very clear. You have to explain the Matzah and the Maror. This is and the Pesach. We explain it even though we don't have it to point at. And so this is one way to tell the story that you don't skip. Telling the story with the Ten Commandments is another way to tell the story. It's very important. But with the 10 plagues, the 10 utterances, as we said before. But so what is this meaning of the Pesach, the Matzah, the Moror? We're going to read it in the Haggadah, and Rabbi Menachem is going to bring it right here. So this actually, if you remember back, what did the story start with? What did we start off telling the story with? It's the first thing that was so key to telling the story on Seder night. How does the Maggid start? No. Before that.
Before how we
No. Before that. We said it's a unique feature of Seder night. We have to tell the story starting with this.
Wrong.
No. Excellent.
I said that.
I didn't hear you.
I said Yaakov and his children.
No, that's wrong. He said something else. Questions is the correct answer. Questions. 4 questions, right? We talked about that. Yeah, there's 4 questions. And we see, because of questions and answers. You don't tell the story. If I would come here and give you a lecture, open up and start, just reciting to you, lecturing to you, it wouldn't be as interesting. What do? I sometimes I ask you questions to raise the interest first. You've got to plow the field before you plant in it. So this is.
Proof of this, because I don't actually remember it being 4 questions. He thinks you're lying. I don't think you're lying, but I actually don't remember it.
Ma nishtana halayla ze mikol
We don't
haleilot.
sing, so I don't.
It's in there, and we're going to open up the Haggadot very soon.
Okay.
But when I say the beginning, you're getting confused because what's the beginning? Where's Mariv? And then there's Kiddush, right? And then there's a few other things, but right, because we have a whole Seder. We're going to go through the Kadesh or Chatz Karpas. Yachat Magid is when we tell the story. So when we get to the Magid, the first part of the Magid is the 4
Okay,
questions.
so you're talking about the story of
That's what we're talking about now. The story of the
Seder
mitzvah.
itself starts.
Well, the essence, the major mitzvah we're doing is to tell the story. Of course, there's other
Right.
mitzvot too. We talked about eating the matzah. That's what we started with. But we're putting now. This chapter is about telling the story. It's about the Haggadah, telling. So how do you start telling the story? You don't tell the story with the. You start with questions. You ask the questions. What are the questions about? About these 3 things. About the 4. There should be 4 things. Right, 4 questions.
Right, 4
So why are there 4 when there's 3 questions? The 3 questions. Well, one should be about the Pesach, one about the matzah, one about the Mor. There is a question about the matzah. There's a question about the Mor. There used to be a question about the Pesach. We took it out because we don't have the Pesach sacrifice anymore. We replaced it with a question about the leaning and a.
We recite the Pesach sacrifice that our ancestors would eat when the temple stood. What is it for? This matzah that we eat, what is it for? And this maror that we eat, what is it for?
In other words, even after we asked the Manishtan at the beginning, which relate to these issues, now when we're actually going to explain it, it's really the last section before we eat. It's the end of the Magid, where we say, Rabbi Gamaliel said, whoever doesn't mention these 3 things doesn't fulfill his obligation. Matzah, mar, amar. And then we end up with questions too. The last part of the Seder has question. The Magid has questions, and the beginning of the Magid has questions. What did we say? We're Jewish. The Jewish way is to answer a question with a question. So here we have another question. Here we repeat: why do we eat the matzah, the Pesach? Why do we eat the maror? Okay. So what is the answer though? Finally, we asked the first set of 4 questions, and we gave the answer, 2 answers. Rav, Shmuel, physical slavery and physical release, and spiritual paganism and redemption that God gave us the Torah. Amazing. We already told 2 stories. Now we're telling a 3rd story. The 3rd story, which is, we already told the 3rd story with the 10 plagues, right? And he didn't get into it, but those 10 plagues were part of the Midrash. We're telling the story based on analyzing and learning out from verses in the Torah and sort of riffing on those like a blues riff on the verses in the Torah, sort of a jazz type of variations on the theme of what the Psukim actually say in Parshat Kitavo. But then we finally get to now perhaps a 4th story, and the 4th story here is based on the show and tell. Pesach, Matzah, Maror. We ask questions again. Why do we eat this? And then we give the answer. So finally, and this happens at the end of the Haggadah because we want to follow it up by tasting that matzah and the maror. So we have to. It's actually a debate. What did Rabbi Gamaliel mean when he says, "Whoever has not said these 3 things on Pesach has not fulfilled his obligation"? Which obligation? So the way we're understanding it now means you haven't fulfilled your obligation if you do not explain them. What obligation? To tell the story. You have to tell the story in this way. There's another way of interpretation the Ramban brings, and he says, whoever does not say these things does not feel his obligation. What obligation? Obligation of eating. You're not fulfilling your obligation of eating the matzah if you just stuff it down your face without knowing what it's about. And if you just eat the maror, I don't care how much more you get red in the face 100 times. If you're not recalling that this represents the bitterness of our enslavement in Egypt, you're not fulfilling the obligation. That's what Rabbi Gamliel meant. Whoever does not say these things does not fulfill his obligation. Which obligation? Perhaps the obligation of eating is not fulfilled. It has to be explained eating, meaningful eating. And either way we cut it, we describe and explain the meaning of those foods right before we eat them. So it really lends itself to follow-up of the actual eating. When you're eating it, we just spoke about it. We just understood why, and now we're doing it. It sort of hopefully will stay with you long enough after you've washed and you've stolen the afikomen and you're ready to fulfill all the technical details of leaning, and here we lean, here we don't lean, all that. Don't forget to think about the meaning of eating the matzah and the maror. What is the meaning of the Pesach sacrifice when we ate the Pesach sacrifice? So there's four paragraphs now that Moshe is going to read for us in a beautiful oratory style, where Rav Melamed sort of summarizes his interpretation of what the messages are. It's based on the words in the Haggadah. The Haggadah just quotes a pasuk, for each one. Pasuk for the Pesach, pasuk for the matzah, and pasuk for the maror. Perhaps a little bit of an elaboration. Moshe, take it away. The Paschal offering on page 206. The first one.
The Paschal offering expresses Israel's special relationship with God. Matzah expresses freedom, and maror expresses the significance of the enslavement. The Paschal offering expresses Israel's special relationship with God because it recalls God's miraculous differentiation between Israel and other nations, slaying the Egyptians' firstborn while passing over the home of the Israelites. One might say that Israel's special status is not obvious to all as long as the temple lies in ruins, and so we cannot offer the Paschal sacrifice nowadays. The matzah, though, which expresses our redemption from Egypt, is a perpetual mitzvah, as we have never lost the freedom we obtained when we left Egypt and became wholly attached to God. This is true freedom, because only one who occupies himself with Torah is truly free. Even when we are enslaved among the nations, our spirit remains free. But the Torah allows us to transcend material enslavement.
I always like to add into my Seder a quote from one of my heroes, Natan Sharansky, the leader of the Soviet refusnik movement, who many people attribute the falling of the Iron Curtain of the communist era to him and his group. And when he was being thrown into jail, he was sent to Siberia. He was in the Gulag for 13 years. He, they had this puppet, sort of circus court, and they accused him of treason and, all sorts of things that he didn't do. And but then you give a moment to the victim, to the prosecuted, to have a statement. So before he went to jail, he said the following: from the looks of things, everybody looks at this scene from the outside, thinks that, the judge who is giving me my verdict, and he could decide my fate. He has all the freedom in the world, and I'm about to be imprisoned for years, in ignominy, how does it work? That I'm enslaved. But actually, to tell you the truth, it's the opposite. I am the free man, because you, the judge sitting there, you have to do what you're you have to find me guilty, as the government wants you to find me guilty, and you have to make up those charges, and you're following the orders of this oppressive dictatorship, communist regime, and I am living out my morals and my values, and I'm standing up for what I believe is right. So I'm the free man, and true freedom is to live according to your values. And essentially, even though he wasn't exposed to too much Jewish learning, what he was saying that to be a Jew is to be free, and the matzah represents this freedom. So when we eat the matzah, it's a symbol of our freedom, because it's the Jewish type of freedom, the freedom to not just the freedom from. And ultimately, he got out. He even went back to the prison that he was imprisoned in as a minister of the state of Israel. It's quite a amazing v'nahafochu, which we merited to see in our day. And he lives here in Jerusalem, not far from here. So one day we'll meet him. That's right. Who knows whatever happened to that judge who put him behind bars. Anyways, that's the matzah. Represents freedom, to be this freedom of the spirit primarily, and the Torah allows us to transcend material enslavement. I was reminded of this story. Maror, go ahead, finish it off.
Maror is a mitzvah of rabbinic origin during the periods when the temple is in ruins and the paschal sacrifice cannot be offered. Perhaps this is because Maror alludes to the pain and bitterness of the enslavement, and we cannot yet fully grasp the meaning of our suffering. Only when we are able to offer the paschal sacrifice will we grasp the full meaning of our suffering. Only when we can see how it refines and purifies us and understand how our salvation sprouted from within all the difficult times does the mitzvah to eat Maror become deoraisa. Until then, we have faith that everything is for the best. And
I told you the story about the silly guy who ran out before the good stuff came. He stopped at the bitter herbs, and we have to appreciate that the suffering is part of our destiny, but hopefully the path towards freedom. So these are the three. These are the maybe four different ways in which we tell the story. Tell the story through, everything we talked about. The questions, the different answers, the four children we spoke about, the plagues and the different ways in which God revealed Himself when He took us out of Egypt, and ultimately the last thing that we explain is the Pesach Matzah Maror. And then we eat the special. We start with the mitzvah eatings of the matzah and the maror, and then we go on and we actually have a party. The party started earlier with the 4 cups, but we're going to get into the details of the halacha b'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. We're going to start the next chapter 16, which is the last chapter in the book. And as you can see, it's a very long chapter. It's about 450 pages. That's why I wanted to make sure we have the 2 weeks to cover these 50 pages, maybe a little bit much, but this is the most practical part of the description of the Seder night, and we're going to open up the Haggadot themselves and take a look at it. There's a special order to the night, and so we're going to get into the actual Pesach Seder, the order of the Seder, coming soon. Before that, I want to take your questions, and then I want to, as I said, do something about Purim coming up. Yeah, Moshe.
So, could we do like a mock Seder? Just it doesn't have to be anything like elaborate, but just like a mock Seder.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Yeah, almost every year we've had
mock like a
pretend Seder.
Just to mock somebody.
Yes, we're mocking.
It doesn't have to be in a pejorative way. Yeah, it's the same word, but it's not meaning in any way making fun of anybody. It's sort of like a
imitation
or preparation, a markup. Yes, you use it in business world as well. It's a good idea. Sorry?
I think we should do the story you told us.
Which one? Dressing up?
The goy and the Jew coming to the
By all means, you should put on a play. That's a great idea.
We're doing one.
I like it. Good.
I have to start writing the script though.
Yeah, you better get going. Okay. And Nathan, you had a question as well, or you forgot? Sorry, Ariel.
So, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror is more important to recite. Say if you don't have time to don't have time.
Yeah, than probably anything else.
Commandments because
10 plagues also. Yeah.
10 plagues. Because these 3 remind us of the 10 plagues in our time in Egypt. Right? So
they remind us of the major themes of the story. The major themes of the story is, that God redeemed us, and that we had the bitter enslavement
you'll be
first.
Thinking about the 10 plagues when you say these things, like it's gonna be.
Yeah. I mean, the 10 plagues is sort of like the tools with God revealed Himself and redeemed us. So it's like details of, and the Pesach sacrifice, which we don't have today. Maybe because we don't have a temple, obviously, but it represents, in Rav Melamed's teaching here, the special status of the Jewish nation. The passing over is the differentiation between the Jews and the non-Jews. It's hard. It's really a hard part of Judaism to swallow. For many people nowadays, we live in an age of equality, and we're all human beings and we're all the same. And to say that you're different is really swimming upstream. You're against the current. But this is a central theme in Judaism, that the chosenness of the Jewish people. And that's what the Pesach represents. And we don't have a Pesach sacrifice, maybe because we can't really explain it or even understand it until in its fullness, until we reach a further stage in our redemption when the temple's back. Bezrat Hashem, soon. Okay, other comments, questions? Yes, Ravid. 1 second, Nathan. Yeah, Ravid first.
When I looked at the Haggadah in totally, I asked myself, what can I do to improve my personal life? What are the messages in the Haggadah to improve my life? I still don't get it.
I hear. I think it's important what you're saying, very important. For example, now we're going to talk about Purim for a few minutes as well, and it's very hard to think historically. So many thousands of years ago, there was this band of people like in the sandy desert, and like we're trying to think of pyramids and slaves and whips, and it's very hard to relate to. And then, okay, we went out and we were in the desert eating this man. We don't even know what kind of food this was. And we try to picture it, and we watch The Prince of Egypt. We try to, but it's hard to connect to. What does that mean for me? And by all means, the best. We're one of the mitzvot of the Seder night is to make it real, to relive, not just to tell the story. So you can relive and by actually trying to put on a toga or some kind of a kafiyah and dress like the ancient Israelites, and maybe we eat the food that they ate, so we try to reenact it in a physical way. But the other way to really try to make it real is what you're suggesting, Ravid, and that is to really inculcate the messages, the spiritual message, the moral message, the psychological message of freedom and enslavement. And so we're not going to talk about only the physical freedom. We're going to talk about the religious freedom, so we can think about religious freedom. But wait, then there's also internal slavery and internal freedom. Sometimes we use it as a metaphor that we're enslaved. Somebody who is a bad habit, best example perhaps is somebody who smokes. They're trying to quit smoking, and they can't. Essentially, they're enslaved. And hopefully nobody here smokes, but we all have our bad habits, things that we're in a rut and that we need to change, and that we know that we should. So in a certain way, we're enslaved. We're stuck in a place where we don't want to be. A certain way of thinking, even. Forget about bad behaviors, but a certain way of thinking. Where sometimes, I think poorly of myself. I think I'm insecure, and ultimately, the goal is to free ourselves from these patterns of thought and patterns of behavior. And you can think about the freedom on Pesach in those terms as well. We're supposed to be free men. We're going to see the 4 cups of wine. We're like we're like princes, the son of the king. So a prince is not insecure. A prince is not forced to act in a way that he doesn't really find fruitful anymore. And so we have to free ourselves from all of our bad habits 100%. This is perhaps a Hasidic approach and a Musar approach to sort of modernize or individualize the story of Pesach. And that's something that's very powerful. I agree. It's something that we should strive for. Not only the historical message, and not only the religious message of the Jewish people being created and being chosen, and our commitment to God, but also in the internal work.
I think what I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
is, of course, I read the Haggadah. I try to understand the history and to do everything what I need to do. But then after this, I need to ask myself, okay, what does it mean for my personal life? What can I do? What I need to do to improve my personal life with the struggles I have? And I made this decision. I want to have an appointment with my personal rabbi to talk about my own Mitzrayim,
Yafeh.
and talk about, okay, tell me, when I look to the Haggadah, the story, what we read, what does I need to do to change it?
Excellent, excellent. I would even encourage you to not do it afterwards. Do it in the middle of the Haggadah. That's another way to tell the story. It's another aspect of the story and many times.
Action.
Yeah, many times I've done that at the Haggadah. The leader often has it's like the director of a play, right? You can say the same words, but the director can give it the flavor and the color and the attitude and the emphasis. And so, by all means, sometimes we have a moment of silent meditation where I ask people to think about, something that they really, if it's when we're talking about the Gnut, the bad parts. So think about something you're stuck, where something that you really, or a difficult thing that you had in the last year, and then we'll perhaps have another meditation when we're something we're going to celebrate, and we try to make it real. But in that way, 100%. That's part of it's a perfectly legitimate way of telling the story, and so I encourage you to do it when we're actually in the middle of telling the story, not. Obviously, if your therapist is not around or your rabbi is not around, you can prepare for that. But by all means, that's part of the spiritual work of telling the story. It's a good point. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, you must have heard about this. Did you forget?
The route that just died.
What?
Remember, don't forget.
Don't forget what they did.
Did you read it?
Yeah.
Did you talk about it? Amalek also. Amalek, of course. So we do this in the festival of Purim is coming up, where we play on this theme, and we prepared for it with Parshat Zachor, the Shabbat before. And what does that mean to remember Amalek? There's a similar idea Ravid is stressing as well. It's very hard for us to imagine, Amalek nowadays, and we don't have any Amalekites. So what does all this mean? Remember, don't forget. Okay, forgetting. So it sounds like you should have a historical consciousness, but it means much more than that. And we discussed it, that I believe the mitzvah to remember Amalek is connected to having moral clarity. There is evil in the world, and we have to fight it. Even in this European war, which we're talking about, it's very important that even though for political reasons we may not be able to say everything that we believe, at least we should know for ourselves that there's an aggressor here. There's a really evil dictator which is guilty of war crimes, and that's evil. It's Amalek-like behavior. So that's one level of making it relevant, is that when you start a war for any reason, for political gain, we don't do that. That's not approved of. We don't do that. Yeah. What do we call our army?
Defense.
Israel Defense Forces, right? And the horrible suffering and the Ukrainian foreign minister was here in Israel yesterday, and he said that according to their calculations, more civilians have been killed than soldiers. And it's been in the first 2 weeks now of this invasion. In any case, but that's a political and maybe a moral stand and interpretation of Amalek. But by all means,
Yes.
this is just what we did with Pesach and the slavery and freedom, bringing it inside into a personal. We could talk about the Amalek is equivalent with the Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, and the themes that we speak about. Amalek represents doubt, represents taking advantage of the stragglers, like we read about, that the Amalek came and attacked the weakest. And some people say that we should think about the Amalek inside of us, just like you were saying about the slavery, and that we are enslaved internally. There's Amalek inside of us. Sometimes we doubt ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to be sure of what we believe, and we have to rid ourselves of that and fight against the right. You want to make it relevant and modern. You can say it's postmodernism. There is no right and wrong. There's no gender either. Right? I feel like I'm a woman. I'm a woman. That's it. You can't. There's no absolute values. And maybe the fight against Amalek is that there's good and there is evil. It's not just subjective morality here. There's objective morality, and there's objective right and wrong. And also within myself, there are things that I need to stop doing. There are things, there are feelings, there's attitudes that I need to change, and all those bad behaviors can be also called Amalek. So we can do this to this mitzvah, the Purim celebration. We spoke about is we're going to talk about the laws and review the laws, B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow morning, because it's coming up soon. And I want to personally invite you guys to come over if you're free on Thursday morning. Great. You're not in our group. Yeah, Moshe put nothing in our WhatsApp group. Are you? Sent a message. Or Weinberg Share group. Yeah, so send a message. You should come over. So this is a different one.
Send me, bro.
Moshe put you in. And we'll be able to celebrate at least a pre-Purim for you. I'll be in full swing. But we'll get together Thursday morning. We'll talk more about these themes, and we'll sing, and we'll enjoy, and we'll celebrate together a little bit. And we'll get ready for Purim. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll review some of the halachot tomorrow, just a brief time, and we'll continue our preparation for the Seder night. B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. Okay?
Thank you so much.